All right, let's get right into it. We're about to explore one of the most ambitious and frankly brutal projects in ancient history, Rome's complete and total transformation of North Africa. Now, this wasn't just a simple conquest. No, this was a top-to-bottom re-engineering of an entire continent, leaving behind a blueprint so powerful you can still see it today.
So I want to start with a question for you. What if an empire that collapsed nearly 2,000 years ago left behind a signature so huge, so vast, that you could only really see it from the sky? I know it sounds like something out of a movie, but it is absolutely real, and it's the key to understanding just how Rome built its incredible power.
And this is it. This is the proof. If you were to fly over Tunisia today, you'd see it, these faint outlines of a massive ancient grid etched into the landscape. Now, those aren't modern property lines. They're the ghosts of a Roman plan to systematically divide and control North Africa, a project that had to begin with an act of complete and utter destruction. You see, before Rome could draw its own map, it first had to erase the one that was already there. And that meant dealing with its oldest and greatest rival, the mighty city of Carthage. This one Latin phrase, it tells you everything you need to know about the Roman mindset at the time. Carthage must be destroyed. A senator, Cato the Elder, was so obsessed with this idea that he ended every single speech he gave. It didn't matter if he was talking about taxes or roads with these exact words. It was a relentless drumbeat, a national obsession to wipe their enemy off the face of the earth. So when Rome finally made its move, they gave Carthage a series of ultimatums that were just impossible. First, they said, surrender all your weapons. The Carthaginians, hoping to avoid a war, actually did it. They handed over 200,000 sets of armor and 2,000 catapults. Then Rome said, okay, now destroy your navy. And they did that too, burning their entire fleet. But then came the final cruel twist. Abandon your city, move 10 miles inland. For a great sea trading power, that was a death sentence. And Rome knew it. It was never a real negotiation. It was the excuse they were looking for. Of course, the Carthaginians chose to fight. What followed was a horrific 3-year siege. When the city finally fell, Roman soldiers spent 6 days going street by street, slaughtering almost everyone they found. The 50,000 people who survived were sold into slavery, and the city, it was demolished. Utterly. The slate was now blank. And this is the really important part. With Carthage gone, Rome didn't just pack up and leave. They began to draw their new world right on top of the ashes of the old one. And their main tool for control? Engineering. So how did they do it? Well, it all comes down to this one Roman concept, centuriation. This was the method that created those grid patterns we saw earlier. Roman surveyors just imposed this perfectly rational, perfectly rigid grid of squares right onto the landscape. Each square was a century, and it was designed for one thing, farming. But you've got to understand, this was so much more than just drawing lines on a map. It was a complete conceptual takeover. It forced a settled Roman style of agriculture onto lands that had been used by nomads for centuries. It was a way of saying, this land doesn't belong to you anymore. It operates on Roman rules now. Now, to make all this work, to support this new world, they needed water. A lot of water. And their solution was just audacious. They built the Zagawan Aqueduct. At 132 kilometers long, it was one of the longest aqueducts in the entire Roman Empire. Just an incredible feat of engineering. And the scale of it is just staggering. This one aqueduct delivered up to 30,000 cubic meters of fresh water every single day. That's enough to support a massive city. We're talking public baths, fountains, the whole shebang, in a naturally dry climate. Rome wasn't just conquering the land, they were fundamentally changing how it worked. Okay, so this massive, world-altering project, it had to be for something, right? It had a very specific purpose. We've seen how they did it. Now let's dig into the why. At the end of the day, it was all about turning North Africa into the economic engine that fueled the Roman Empire. Those neat, gridded fields and well-watered cities weren't for the locals. They were designed from the ground up to extract resources and ship them straight back to Rome. And this chart breaks it down perfectly. Look at that. Half of all exports were grain. That's the food that kept the massive population of Rome itself from starving. Another huge chunk was olive oil, an absolute staple. And then you see that last 10%, exotic animals. And that's where the story takes a much darker turn. So you can see just how vital this all was. The grain went to the annona, that was the state-subsidized food program that kept the Roman people fed and, more importantly, kept them from rioting. The olive oil was for everything, cooking, fuel for lamps, you name it. And those animals, well, they were for the bloody games in the Colosseum, a key part of Roman propaganda and public life.
But this economic machine had a voracious appetite, and it came at a devastating cost. The empire's insatiable demand for animals for the games was an ecological disaster. The North African elephant and the legendary Atlas lion, the kind you see on Moroccan emblems today, they were literally hunted into extinction.
And if you want to understand the sheer, brutal scale of this, get a load of this number. For a single set of games, the Emperor Trajan had 11,000 animals slaughtered in the arena, most of them captured and shipped from North Africa. It was an industrial-scale annihilation of wildlife, all for entertainment. But here's the twist in the story. All of this immense wealth, it didn't just flow in one direction. Over time, it created a powerful new center of Roman culture and influence in Africa itself. The province became so important that it actually started to reshape the empire. The result was this unique cultural blend, an Africo-Roman identity. Cities like Douga in Tunisia, they weren't just Roman copies. They were these vibrant, magnificent places where you'd hear Latin, Punic, and local Berber languages all in the same marketplace. The wealth from all that agriculture and trade built some of the most spectacular cities anywhere in the empire. Now this is one of my favorite comparisons. We all know the Colosseum in Rome, right? The icon. But look at the amphitheater of El Jem. It's in a provincial African city that got rich off the olive oil trade, and it could hold 35,000 people. This wasn't some quiet backwater. This was a province with the wealth and the ambition to rival Rome itself. And that brings us to the ultimate proof, the final chapter in this incredible transformation, the absolute climax of the story. In the year 193, a man named Septimius Severus, born in what is now Libya, became the emperor of Rome. The conquered province, remade in Rome's image, had now produced the empire's leader. It had moved from the periphery to the very center of power. So we come back to that blueprint, those faint grid lines still visible on the earth today. It was a plan that destroyed a rival, fed a metropolis, and built a new, powerful part of the empire. But it also came with an immense human and ecological cost, which leaves us with a final question to think about. What is the true cost of reshaping a world in your own image?